Sherry Levin, welcome to Sports Management Podcast.
Thank you so much, Marcus. It's great to be here.
Great to have you on the show. So you have built a career around leadership, mindset, resilience. You've been a basketball coach, educator, speaker, and author. The book behind you, Pregame, A Winning Mindset. But if you were to give yourself a brief introduction for the listeners, how would that sound like?
That's a great question because how many hours do you have? Now I'm only kidding. Don't turn the channel, anybody. It's a very brief mindset reset because I've always been in sports. Since I was just a young child, sports has always been a part of my life, whether it was watching, participating, it was just something I gravitated to. And what I've learned over the years is the lessons of sport can translate and transfer into any part of your life. And obviously, as you get older and you go through education and then you go through a career, no matter what you do, I have found that I've been drawing upon those lessons. So it got to a point where whatever I have done has been in an athletic space and certainly had drawn upon those experiences.
Yeah, and I definitely believe that too, that lessons from sports can be with you in your whole life and in business, but other factors as well. It's, overcoming adversity and teamwork and hard work and, the list goes on and on.
Absolutely. And it starts really the youth. I mean, the participation, we talk about it. I know you're involved in hockey and I watch hockey. And I think the ideas of getting out there and just seeing and admiring the expertise of not only just professionals, but even the dedication of coaches, dedication of young athletes, just going out there and enjoy. Athletics, I think sometimes we forget the joy of being connected to something, what I always would say is something bigger than yourself. Right. If you connect with a team, if you connect with, and let's not only just say athletics, but let's say if you're a singer and you're in a chorus, you still have a director. If you're in a play, you still have a director. You still have castmates and teammates and everybody, even now in the workforce, I have a team. It's something that you learn as you go and you experience new experiences every day.
Definitely. And of course, physical sports like moving as a kid and everything, it has both physical and mental benefits that is super important as well.
Absolutely. And anybody out there listening, and, I love listening to your podcast, and it's just a wealth of information and different people that add, entirely different perspective. But in the sports, and again, I look at my own experiences, let down. You don't always win. Winning is something that what I always say is the result. Right. So if you have a goal and you want to win, you're keeping score, you're keeping time. That's part of the game. But the journey of what you learn is going to take you to the next step. Like they travel with you. No matter where you go, those hardships, those times when you're crying. I don't know if anybody watched the Indianapolis 500 yesterday. I mean, it was a .02 result. And obviously to the victor, the spoils, and they're jumping up and excited. And the driver that lost, was heartbroken by .02 seconds. And you think about that, he'll carry that on. And the reporters always ask the question, how do you handle this? And he's processing it in that moment and he's tearful. And heartfelt response is, we'll learn from this and we'll try to get it next time. And to people who aren't on a team or coaching, that value comes when you're doing a proposal in business. You sometimes don't get the proposal you wanted, and how you assess, and then you move forward, and then you try to adjust. And that's lessons that you get from sports.
Definitely. And I think that you learn more from losing than winning. So that's why I know in Sweden, many times they don't count scores for children below a certain age. And I feel like that's wrong. I understand the pressure that comes with winning and losing, but I think that you need to have that to some extent. And then, of course, you need to have great coaches that, talks to you when you lose, that, okay, we will work on some things here and it will be better. And sometimes you lose, sometimes you win. But to not do that at all and not having that losing experience, I think that you're missing out in the long run.
That's a great point. And I do agree with you and the value that you get from the ability to adjust. And what I always used to say, if you look at our schedule, right? If you're looking at a schedule and you're looking at teams that, you think you could win, think you may look, it's going to be a tight game. Obviously, everybody has different new players and such, but you're looking at that. And I used to say our record sometimes is determined by our athletic director who's setting the schedule. You could set up a schedule against teams that are typically inferior to you, and you would have a great record. Or you could set up a schedule of teams that you are going to challenge you, and you may not have such a great record, but does that change the level of your team? It really doesn't. If you think about your record, again, is the result of something, but the process that you're going through, the idea that you're challenging yourself, the idea that if you look at sports percentages in baseball, your great hitting percentage is over 300. That means you're missing 7 out of 10 times. In basketball, a shooting percentage over 50% is fabulous, which means you're missing half the time that you shoot. In ice hockey, I think it's what's the percentage of scoring a goal after a shot?
Yes, I think my coach told me when I was playing, if you score 1 out of every 10 shots, that's pretty good. And I think that's approximately what it is. So 10%, yeah.
10%, exactly. So think about what you have to do with the 9 that you're missing. And that mentality can carry over in every aspect of our life. You got to teach kids, you're not going to win all the time, but what do you do with that? That's why we're having this conversation, which, hopefully the people listening will really get something out of what we'll continue to talk about.
For sure. And also the importance of coaches. I think especially like when they are younger, to have a great coach. And you have spent decades coaching basketball. So first of all,
Yes.
Why did you decide to become a coach?
Great question, because at first when I graduated, my playing career was officially retired, coaching was something I didn't really want to do because I still wanted that ball in my hand. I wanted that ball in my hand, and telling somebody to work hard or telling somebody to go to the gym and those kind of things. I'm like, I think I'll just consult. So what I did was I went around to camps, and I had my own summer camp. And that was where I got my giving back, right? Because I always felt like I learned so much, I experienced so much in the game, I wanted to give back. So then I started coaching individuals and giving lectures and speeches and doing a touring circuit. And then what I realized is that I was missing that connection. I was missing the connection that you get from being a coach and a player, the one that I had with my coach, Togo Palazzi at Holy Cross. And that connection was something that I had the opportunity then. I was back in Worcester, Massachusetts, which is where Holy Cross was. And a friend of mine needed an assistant coach. So she said, would it work in your schedule? And I said, yeah, it was college, WPI. And I did it. And from that point, then I got a call to the prep school. Then I ended up working with at Worcester Academy. And the rest is 25 years later. And the value, I would say, of being a coach is to make a difference. And my personality of a coach was always demanding, but never demeaning. And learned that through the years. And just to give you a little background of the lens that I look through, I was a ESPN women's basketball analyst and other local stations. And I got to be in the locker rooms. I got to be in the pregame. I got to analyze the games of the greatest coaches in women's basketball. Pat Summitt being one, Tara Vanderveer from Stanford, Jim Foster when he was coaching, Bonnie Henriksen, Virginia Tech, and all of these coaches. I had the lens to see, it was like a master class in coaching. Like you couldn't get any other better training than that. So once I started coaching, I had all this information on how to look at a game, which was a lens that very, very few people had. And that I think really, truly helped by coaching, not just the X and O's, but how to manage the team.
Because I know that tactics and skills, and you need all of that, obviously. But you have also chosen to spend much attention on mindset. It's also the, the topic of your book. So we'll talk about that more in detail. But why is mindset so important for athletes?
If the experts will say, when I'll start a talk and I'll say, okay, everybody stand up. And if you want to stand up, go ahead. And when you agree with me and when you don't agree with me, sit down. So I'll say, how many of you think that mental performance is 50%? And then most people will stay standing, and I'll go to 60 and 65, and few will start to sit down, 70 and 75. And the experts will say that mental performance is about 70 to 80% of your performance. When you think about that, and again, I picked this up, when you think about that, think about all the time that coaches spend on skill work, on conditioning, on team, the X's and O's of a team sport and an individual sport, obviously your skill and conditioning, but not as much on your mindset. If the experts are saying that as well as you could quote amazing athletes, Kobe Bryant and Serena Williams always say that their mental attitude is such a great part of their performance, and then it's something that we need to train because the mindset is a muscle. And I firmly believe that any part of your mindset you can train, just like you go to the gym and you're training your biceps and you're training your lungs for conditioning. So if your mindset is a muscle, you want that muscle to be as strong as you can.
And then the obvious question then will be, how do you train your mindset?
Yes, exactly. That's where I would come in, right? Your mindset, like any habit, is something that you just don't do it once and then call it a day or a week. It takes, I mean, again, experts will say it takes about, a month-ish to change and to really hold firm to that. So there's many different ways of training your mindset. One I would start with is kind of my anchor, is your authenticity. And to truly be the person that can present to your team, because trust me, when you're sitting in that locker room, which is part of my pregame is the book is about, when you're standing in that locker room as a coach or sitting, those kids are looking at you, nothing gets by them. Or those adults, nothing gets by them. They're listening to your words and they have to trust you. When you are asking them in the end of a game situation to give more or to do something and their lungs are burning and their legs are hurting, and you're saying, no, I need more, where is that coming from? They have to trust you. So the authenticity piece is something that when you're going to build your mindset, you have to be true to you. What's your personality? What are your goals? And if you can figure that out, then you take it to the next step. Another tool I talk about in training your mindset is the idea of dedication. I know many people talk about dedication, and it truly just if you're taking one thing from this podcast, is the idea of you will give more to somebody else than typically yourself. We will let ourselves down, and it's okay because it's ourselves. But when you're thinking, and I'll have all my players and anybody out there think of who you're going to dedicate what you're going to do, whether it's today, whether it's a week, whether it's a project, whether it's a game, a season, your sales. If you're going to do that, then you will go the extra mile. So write it down in the journal. Who are you going to dedicate something to? And then in that moment, when it's stressful, when there's pressure, when it's that moment that you have to draw upon the strength, you think about that hero, you think about that person that you dedicate it to. So that's one tool. Another tool, Marcus, is gratitude. And, I keep a gratitude journal, and I recommend everybody keep a gratitude journal, because journaling is something important because you're getting it out and it really sticks better. And a gratitude journal, it can be very simple. You could either write one thing, two things, three things that you are grateful for at the end of the day or as the day begins. When you're having your tea or your coffee in the morning and you're just getting up, you want to think positive thoughts. So when you're thinking about something you're grateful for in that moment, I hate to say I'm usually sitting with my cup of coffee, and I'm always grateful for my cup of coffee and my dog is next to me. And then I'll get a little more deeper, but it's, the first things that come to your mind can last for an entire day. And then what happens with your brain is you're conditioning your brain, just like a muscle, you're conditioning your brain to look at a positive thing. And when you look at a positive thing, another positive thing will happen. You'll start to see more things that are positive. And I have more, but I'm going to pause here. You could ask a question or move on to something else.
Yeah, no, I like that mindset because, for example, if you say, like, how many red cars did you see on your way to work? Then you might not know. And then if you tell tomorrow when you go to work, count how many red cars you see, and then you see a bunch. And I think it's the same what you said there with a positive mindset. If you're looking for positive things, I think that you will find them. You definitely can influence that mindset yourself to become more positive. And then, of course, there will be hurdles on the way, but to have that mindset will definitely benefit you.
Yep, absolutely. And when you talk about other tools within an action, right, we have a mindset reset. Right. So what is that? You could be in the heat of something. And again, it even could be standing up and giving a presentation. That's something, you may miss a slide or you may not have said something that you wanted to. In that moment, you want to reset your mind. So we talk about a mental mantra. So what does the mental mantra mean? Do you have a mental mantra when you played, Marcus? Do you have something you said to yourself?
No, I don't think so.
No? Okay. No. So now we can start. Yeah. The mental mantra is something that will get your mindset out of that, oh my God, I just missed that, easy layup, or I had that, the net was wide open in lacrosse and I threw it high. Whatever the sport may be, in that moment, your mind goes to that negative thought. So you want to get out of that onto the next play. So you have a mental mantra. Mine was always, you got this, Sherry. Ironically, I did all these things before they became a thing. I would visualize, I would have a mental mantra before it became visualization and a mental mantra, which is who knew. The mental mantra is something that and you can do like Sherry, you got this, deep breath, and then maybe like, I clap my hands or something. So you have a physical reset, you have a mental reset, and then you have that breath that just centers you. And you can do that we practice it, and you can do that in 2 seconds or less to get on to the next play. And believe it or not, your mind then just connects to a reset. And when you can reset to a positive mentality as opposed to the negative, which is obviously you're upset you just missed that or, whatever, then the next play is going to be that much more successful.
Yeah. And that's so important because what we said before, in hockey, you miss one, you only hit 10%, and in baseball, it was 30%, and meaning that you're missing 90 and 70%. So then to be able to move on from that and not go down a negative spiral is, super important then to be successful in that sport.
Absolutely. And the more that you tell yourself, again, if mental performance is 70 to 80%, the more you tell yourself the positive things, the easier it's going to be to then stack that up. You're building that foundation. One little word shift. This is another thing that not only me, but other people will talk about is one word shift, which is from I have to do something to I get to. And, my team used to laugh when I'd say, okay, everybody on the line, we'd finish with sprints or whatever. And they go, oh, give me that. And I say, no, guess what? You get to do the sprints because we're playing a really great team tomorrow and you want to win at the end of the game. You want to have the legs. We get to run the sprints because we have this beautiful gym. We get to run the sprints because we're, 22-0. We get to run these sprints. And so the mindset, again, by just one word shift, having to do something to get to do something, you get to go to work, right? Yay. How many people wake up? The things that I love to say, and again, this is another anchor to my book, is game day. Right. And it's not just the idea of, okay, you're actually playing a game, which, sometimes you do. For me, this morning was game day. I knew I was going to be on a podcast with Marcus, and I woke up and I, jumped out of bed, put my feet on the floor and like game day. Right. So what does that game day mean to you and to the listeners? When was the last time you felt game day? And hopefully you have many, many more. And you can then turn what every day it is, jump out of bed on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, you get to go to work. It's game day. You get to do something. You get to be better. You get to work your brain. You get to make a difference in the world. So that mindset, that muscle, we're training it to see things in the way that we want to see them.
Yeah. So you mentioned that you did some of these things before they became popular, so to speak. So, but have your leadership philosophy and coaching philosophy, has that changed anything over time as you have worked on this more?
Yes, it has, because as a player lens, it was always, as I said in the very beginning, it was about having that ball in my hand. Fortunately, I was blessed to have a wonderful coach who believed in me. And that coach helped me become the best player that I could be. And that was really my goal. I had big dreams of I wanted to play in the Olympics. And in 1984, I was invited to Colorado to try out for the Olympic team. Ultimately, I did not make it. But when I got back on that plane to head back to Boston, I was okay with it because I knew in my heart of hearts that I did the best that I could do. So in the process of understanding being your best, sometimes your best isn't going to be the best. And if you can approach anything that you do with the mindset that it's not about the other people, it's about you internally. So the idea of beginning when I was playing that I wanted the ball in my hand, what I realized is as a coach, I could give of my experiences. I could give of myself, of the expertise that I had learned along the way from so many different chapters in my life, whether it was hardships or resilience, then became not more important, but it became equally as important to our success. And again, when I looked at being my authentic self, being demanding and never demeaning, understanding the lens that I had an amazing masterclass of a lens that, it wasn't like I had one coach to learn from. I had a whole army of coaches to learn from. Those experiences would then not only help my players be a great basketball player. I coached an array. When you look at someone like Aaliyah Boston, who was the #1 draft pick in the WNBA and one of the highest paid women athletes, I had opportunity and the joy of coaching someone like that. And then I've coached many players who high school basketball was something that they wanted to do to be with their friends. So how do you do that, and the way that I found equalized that was off the court, everybody was equal. So off the court, the value of going to games, the value of going to the movies, the value of spending time at team dinners, that value brought us together closer as a team. And that value was something that I learned more as I got older, because the more experiences were something that I was able to connect better with the team. So I highly recommend getting to know people in their true self, not just in what they're doing, but what they're bringing.
Yeah, I think that's important as well. And you mentioned earlier that you are a demanding but not demeaning. So in what ways would you say that you were demanding?
I would always ask of a player more than they ever thought that they could give. Because our human tendency is we're going to work hard, but when it starts to, hurt a little bit, we're going to pull back. And no one really knows how much they can give until they're continued to ask to give more and more. So I'll use, Leah Boston, for example. Leah was one of the greatest players in high school. And I said to her and her family, I think at some point she could be the greatest women's basketball player ever. I was a little prophetic in that because I think she might, have an opportunity to do that based on her natural gifts and her skill set. But I didn't coach her the way she was at that moment. I coached her the way that I knew she wanted to get to. She could block a shot in one of our games, and most people, they go, oh, great block. And then I would later say, you know what, you needed to block that with your right hand, not your left. Because when you're playing for the USA against France and they're playing a 6-7 player, you're going to need to do it a better way. So the demanding part was me not just saying, oh, you know what, we just won by 30, great. No, there were many times in the locker room, and I think leaders can really understand this. The result is not so much what I would always look for. I was a very process-driven coach, which allowed me to then look at how they were doing something, not against who or what. So at halftime, we could have had a 20-point lead, and I'd go in the locker room and I would not be happy. And sometimes the players would be like, Coach, we got a 20-point lead. And I'd say, you know what? We're not playing well. The other team just isn't that good. So there's a difference between keep asking for people more. And there's a great quote, and I love quotes, treat a person as they are, and they will remain as they are. Treat a person as they could be, and they'll become what they should be. And that idea was something that, to me, looking at these girls, I knew someday they'd be competing for jobs. I knew someday they would be competing for a raise. I knew someday they would be in some situation where they would have to draw upon a moment that they were pushed. And so therefore, the demanding part became something that was really part of the ethos of my coaching.
Yeah, I like that quote as well. And what you said, so you're pushing them beyond what they think is their boundaries, but perhaps there is more there.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And again, going back to the idea of failure, it's okay. Like there are times where you could stay up all night on a proposal, right? You got a proposal the next day and you could stay up all night trying to get that proposal, and you go in the next day and guess what? You don't get it. But at some point, if you get to that point and it brings you down, then it's hard to get onto the next one. Whereas if you know you did your best, it doesn't work out, go on to the next one. And that's where the resilience piece comes in. And resilient is a word I think we seem to be using a lot, because there's a lot to be resilient for. Everybody has their different levels of knocks and boosts. My dad used to say, every knock is a boost. And I think I learned that early on, that, what do you do with it? You got to take that, you learn from it, you accept it, and you move on, and you figure out a way to make it a different positive, whether it's a shift, whether it's, I have a chapter in the book, pivot or push. Do you keep doing the same thing or do you pivot away?
Yeah. Yeah, that's an interesting one, to know when to pivot or push, right? Like, how do you know if you're banging your head against something and you're not getting anywhere, or when do you need to turn?
Again, I look to experiences. And the experiences that we share, and another chapter in the book I talk about is your head, your heart, and your guts. There are times where the three don't align. There are times where you're lucky to get 2 out of 3. And then, when you're really lucky, you do get 3 out of 3. And so the idea of making that decision based on something that you either know, whether it's a fact or something you feel in the gut, or the emotional aspect of something, which is the heart. And to reconcile those 3, I think, is something that we work on every day. And I think once you make that decision, you got to go with it. you can't the second guess. And I used to always say the worst the words put together in the English language and probably every other language is if only, right? If only I got more sleep that night. If only I prepared better. If only I researched more. If only I listened to Marcus's podcast more. If only, if only are the worst two words you can put together, because that's what we call regret. And you don't want to have that. You want to be able to move on, learn your lesson, and move on.
That's what you said also with the Olympic trials, right? That you were able to leave there with your head up high because you felt like you gave it all and there were no regrets in that sense.
Absolutely. And I would practice, I would train, I would get my rest, eat nutrition. I would do everything that I could control. That's another really important factor in the mindset is control the controllables, right? So again, we'll go back to sports and ice hockey. Sometimes that puck takes an odd bounce, or sometimes the official misses, a trip or something. And you could go every sport, and you could even look at, again, in business, you're giving up that proposal, and sometimes someone has a different bias to that. And I have a player who I would love to talk about too, Letitia Roll, who's an actress and a model. And she tells me all the time, Coach, I learned so much from you, because that idea of handling the rejection, right? Like, how do you handle that? And it's part of life. So when you move on to that, it's something that is really important to get you through the next day. So yes, understanding the idea of when to pivot based on the knowledge that you have to bring with you, because life is all about experiences, is something really important.
We have teased the book now a little bit. So why did you decide to write a book?
So perfect lead in from Letitia. So Letitia is a former player of mine. We're very close. She was an integral part of an undefeated season and a magical season we had in 2006, 20 years ago, which is hard to believe. And we always stayed in touch. We would talk and we lift each other up. It was that kind of, coach-player relationship. And we were talking one day, it was pre-COVID. It was something that I had said. She says, yeah, I always remember that, Coach, in your pregame speeches. And then she encouraged me. She said, you should write a book and share it. You shared it with us, you share it with your players, and share it with the world. And I started thinking about it, and all my pregame speeches were kind of in my head. So I started writing them down. And it became a process. And then I had a publicist and people helped me with writing. And what happened then is I started opening up the net and the lens. It's not just for my team. It's not just for athletes. It's for the broader world of anybody who really wants to take the lessons that you learn and the mindset tools and apply them to anything in your life. So I took the pregame speeches, which were always, they weren't just like, let's go out there and let's, play good defense and let's beat them. It was always kind of a story. My daughter used to say that I was a pregame speech waiting to happen, because we could be doing something in New York City. And then all of a sudden I'm like, oh, you know what? That could be a pregame speech, because there's a lesson in everything. And it's just the way that I looked at things, Marcus. And so I decided then to take the 24, I have many, many more pregame speeches, and then incorporate them into, I was kind of vulnerable, and incorporate them into my life stories and happenstance, and then give ways that people can use them as tools. It's really a playbook for looking at things in a positive way. And anecdotally, I just had this amazing opportunity to be at a book club where they read my book. They were nervous. I was nervous. We were like, what are we doing here? But it was so energizing, because what I realized, and they were not athletes, a couple were, but they were all adults, and each of the pregame stories connected with them in a different way. And it resonated with them, whether it's something they were going through, whether it was something that they had gone through, or something that they can foresee going through. And they each picked a different pregame speech that resonated with them in such a personal way. And that to me was just really fulfilling and something I was really proud of.
Yeah, I understand that, and you should be. And also, as you said, some of them were not athletes. So do you think that the pre-game learnings can be applied in other parts of life as well?
Yes, absolutely. Even from, as I mentioned before, you're giving a proposal, but you got to show up every day to in your life, right? And it's not just work. And people talk about work-life balance. I like to say more that it's just life balance, right? Because we show up every day, we show up in every parts of our life, whether it's a relationship, whether it's a job, whether it's an activity, and your mindset has to come with you. You can't leave that. So if you can learn from my book, and again, the stories that the people were sharing, how it resonated with them had nothing to do with a game. I talk about game day as that analogy of you're excited about something. Anything can be game day. But how do you wake up in the morning? Is it, oh, I got to go to work? Or is it like, yeah, I get to go to work, right? So that little shift, that little mindset, we're not all roses and unicorns here. I mean, everybody has stuff they're going through, but you don't want to sit in it. Right? You don't want to sit in that space. And that's where the idea of looking at the pregame speeches, and I have one that seems to be a very funny one for people. And I don't know if you remember this one. It's if you meet a bear in the woods and you say, how does that translate into a pregame speech for a basketball team, coach? And, somewhere I came along, the idea, I read something where if you do meet a bear in the woods, and hopefully no one will, but if you do, you don't want to run. You don't want to cower. You don't want to shy away from it. You got to get big and strong and loud and mean. And we were an 8 seed one year playing against the number 1 seed. And number 1 seed was really talented. They had won the championship probably like 2 times before. And I gave that as a pregame speech. And first thing I said, I'm like, all right, girls, right? And I knew they were nervous. I said, what happens when you meet a bear in the woods? And they're looking at me like, coach, what? And I said, you get big, you get strong. And then I turned it into how we are going to attack that team. We did not win the game, but we were close. It was like down to the last play. And I was so proud of them for being that strong self. So think about how you can approach that in life. Like anything that you're either afraid of or you're not as confident of, you can't shy away. You have to try to get that strength and be big and strong. So that's just one of the funny pregame speeches, but there are many that can tie into anything. And again, at the book club, one of the favorite ones is the first one I use, which is diamond or a pencil. And it's a choice. There are many quotes out there. I think Shonda Rhimes writes one that where the main character in our own story. What does that choice mean, right? It means you get to make that choice. And how you show up can be something that you got to work on, and hence the dedication and the gratitude and all these different habits that you're forming. And in the stories, some funny, some very serious, some very authentic, that will help people see it within their lens. And then they may go, I can see that now in my own life, and I'm going to shift that mindset and I'm going to work on that.
Because there's so much, call it like distractions or disturbance. You have social media and like you have so much information, and people are telling you how you should be or what you should do or shouldn't do and how you should play and not play. And if you're an athlete, like if you go on social media after the game, you will have thousands and thousands of people who never played your sport telling you, you suck or you should have done that or so forth. So I mean, the mental part and resilience and all of this, I feel, is just more and more important due to how the environment is nowadays.
100% agree. It is very hard for anybody who was looking at social media. And a lot of it, I go back to, again, my father used to share with me, and in horse racing, if you've ever seen horse race, there's some horses that have the blinders on. Yeah. And the reason being is they're not the horse to see the other horses, because it's all about them. And I look at that and blinders, and I would tell the girls, like, it's not about anybody else. It's your story. It's difficult. It's really difficult. And it's hard to get to that point where you can say, it is about all that I can control the controllables. I can't control somebody else. I can't control what someone writes on social media. Shame on them for saying bad things, but you can't control that. Fans are tough. I'm a fan. Again, I grew up outside of Boston, and I'm a fan of every Boston team. And, when they're not winning championships, it's like, what? So in that sense, you just got to kind of be within yourself and be the best version of yourself that you can be. Use all these tools. That's why people write books, and I give experiences, and I speak, and I share things that hopefully can spark and ignite that idea in someone else based on my experiences. And, I referenced the diamond or the pencil, which is one of my favorite pregame speeches, which is about making that choice. Because the atoms in carbon, I'll just give you the short version, the atoms in carbon, when arranged in one way, make the lead of a 10-cent pencil. And when you take those exact same atoms and they're pressurized and they're arranged in a different way, they're a priceless diamond. And when you think about that, you can visualize it too. But when you think about that, it's your choice, be the diamond. And people who have read the book, a lot of times that story resonates with them because they go, oh, you know what? I need to wake up today, and rather than look at it in a different way, I'm going to be that diamond. I'm going to try to be that diamond. And tomorrow I'm going to see that bear in the woods and I'm going to be strong and confident. And, when we talk about confidence, confidence is something that is earned. It's not given. Like, wouldn't it be nice if someone could hand you a piece of paper and say, here, confidence? That doesn't work that way. Even a coach can't give confidence, but a coach can show you how to get it. That's where it's earned. So,
yeah, I love that. So have you had any bumps on the road or difficulties in your career? And if so, how did you overcome them?
Yes, and many. And when you say career, I'm trying not as many, I haven't won a championship and been undefeated every year. So, okay. But that I wouldn't say is hardships. And, I think the journey of career, I've had pivot many different careers and I've had opportunities come to me. Overall career, I would say I've been blessed to have wonderful careers. I work now at a great organization, Generation W, and we educate, inspire, and connect women and teens in addition to, being an author and a speaker. Personally, I had many bumps, and I had probably one of the hardest ones that anybody would say is I'm a breast cancer survivor. And that, to me, I had to draw upon every ounce of experience in a way that I had never thought I could. And in the book, I talk about it. In that year, 2006, I mentioned, it was an undefeated year, but we were in the semifinal game and we were losing by 9 points with 3 minutes and 12 seconds to go. And in, prep school basketball, that's 9 points with 3:12. It's a hot hill to climb. It's possible, maybe not probable, and we came back and we won the game. And then we went on to win the championship in an undefeated year. And fast forward now, 10 years after that was when I was diagnosed with cancer. And I would draw upon that 3:12 many, many times, as would my team in difficult moments. So that experience of getting through something helped me get through something else. You say, that was a game, coach. Yeah, but that shared experience where you put your heart and soul into something. When I was then having chemo or radiation, I would draw upon that mental idea of I can do this and the resilience. And I would say anybody who's going through, God forbid, something like cancer, but any kind of hardship, what are you drawing upon? And I think if you can draw upon positive things that you had before, then you can push through to the next one, because there's always going to be bumps. There's always going to be bumps. And I will give you one anecdote that is very dear to me. Another one of my players, Aluchi Okanawa, who is now at Maryland, star player and will be in the WNBA someday. And she and I get very close. And I did a lot of team bonding, as I mentioned, and team building activities. And one of them was, we called it baggage claim. And what we would do is we'd be in the locker room and say, okay, everybody go around and say something that is bothering you, frustrating you, and you're going to give it like your baggage claim, right? You're going to give your baggage and everybody else will kind of take it over and accept it and we'll get you to the next point. And then you'll feel a lot lighter, right? So everybody was going through, and there were some moments where someone's like, oh yeah, I got an A- in Spanish, or, I got an argument with my best friend, and, lighter things like that. And Aluchi said, again, I'll never forget this. She says, I don't want to disappoint you, coach. And everybody's a little quiet, and I reacted and I said, well, thank you. And you won't. And then we went on. But I pulled her aside after practice and we were leaving the gym. And I said, let me ask you something, Lucci. I said, do you always give your best? And she is the type of player who does. She gives 110% every time she's on the court. So she said, yes, coach, I always do. So I said, you will never disappoint me. I said, if you are giving your best, then I don't care what the result is. The result is the result. It could be you're playing against someone else that's better. That's okay. But if you give me 100%, you will never disappoint me. And that's where those moments come to fruition. And that's where you drop those moments of you're going through something hard. There's another great quote, Marcus, that says, if you're going through hell, keep going, right? Like, you don't want to sit there. You want to find ways, that mental mantra, that's something that's going to get you to the next play, the next series, the next moment that's going to be a positive one.
Yeah. No, for sure. And not that like a positive mindset will, cure cancer, but in my mind, it definitely helps. I mean, you need the medical, things for sure. Yes. But I mean, in general, just when you're having an illness, the body reacts to that if you are positive or negative as well. So it's definitely helping.
Definitely helping. If you have two choices, you can wallow or you can get out of it. And clearly I'm one of those people who want to get out of it and get on to the next one and find ways to do it. That's where people draw upon tools, and that's where people listen to podcasts, and that's where people buy books. And, the positioning angles of things and different ways to look at it, some will resonate and some will fall flat. And when you get those ones that resonate, that can change the trajectory of your life. And that's where I think the personal satisfaction, the energy comes from when I do hear how my book resonated with people who some have nothing to do with sports. And some will say, oh yeah, I'm a coach and I lived through that time. And yes, oh my God, and I'm going to use your pregame speeches. And some people will be like, yeah, I've never been an athlete. However, the story that I read on being stronger together, that's another huge thing that I always talk about is we are stronger together. It's not a cliche. It's, no matter, think about what you do with joy, think about what you do with anything, and then you add somebody with you. And that just makes it so much more alive.
Yeah. No, 100%. There are a lot of young people listening who want to get into the sports industry. What would be some advice that you have for someone who has aspirations to work in the sports industry?
The first thing I'd say, yes, because there's no greater industry, I don't think, than the sports. I mean, again, it's been in my blood since, I can, as long as I have a memory of anything. And I always want to be in sports, whether it was broadcasting or in the business side of it. I would say first, find your joy. And finding your joy and your passion, which can be sometimes very similar and sometimes slightly different when you talk about joy versus something that is like you're driven to, which is your passion. And then you got to communicate and reach out, right? You can't just sit and let something, oh, it's going to come to me. And that never really happens. So sometimes people are very lucky that way, where a change in course and career because you met somebody, but you're still out there and pursuing it. I'd say, research. Research is really important if you want to get into the management part of sports. Certainly management is a big, broad umbrella. You can manage all different kind of things. I'd say nowadays, everything is tactile. You can look on the internet and you can find something that pertains to something you're interested in. I would say the communication. Don't be afraid to reach out. Whether it's even colleges, when people are being recruited, I'd say, what college do you want to go to? Because then you want to reach out to the coach. Sometimes you can't just wait for them to see you, which is the same thing of the career. And we are at a time now, when you look at, Marcus, women's sports, we are at like the highest level of women's sports. You look at NCAA women's basketball, and more people watch women's basketball Final Four than they did the men's. And I'm not saying that's like a measure of it, but what's happening is people are realizing, you know what? Women's sports was always here. It was always amazing in a different way, right? Like below the rim, if you're talking basketball and the NBA, I watched it last night, and same with the Professional Women's Hockey League here in the States. And in Europe, I mean, again, whether it's basketball or hockey or soccer, World Cup is coming. Like there's so much to be able to see in women's sports that the growth is amazing. And when you talk about C-suite women, I believe the number is about 93 to 94% of C-suite women here in the States has been, women who have played, participated in a high level of athletics. So the connection of athletics and sports management is really, now is the time. Now is the time. So be proactive and do your research.
I love that. And that's one of my favorite statistics, this with the connection with doing sports and C-suite executives, because that says so much what we talked about before, all the learnings that you take from sports that you can apply in a business setting.
Yeah. And now is the explosion of it. We've seen it with leagues. We've seen professionals and the buying power when you think of marketing, right? Women make a lot of the decisions in a family when it comes to purchasing things. So the marketing world is now catching up to what we've kind of all known as participants. So it's really a great explosion time to be in leadership and world of sports management.
100%. And you mentioned communication, networking, something that I like very much as well. And I like to ask for my own networking, who from your network do you think would be a good guest on this show?
You know what? A lot of people, I think the one that comes to my mind is a dear friend and my boss, the owner of Generation W, Donna Orender. I'm happy to reach out. And she actually is the commissioner of the new women's professional basketball league, the Upshot League. That literally just tipped off May 27th, and very exciting. Like this is a whole nother avenue and another opportunity for women's basketball players. So very exciting. So I will recommend her, Marcus, as well.
That's amazing. Thank you.
You are welcome.
Finally, before we close here, where can the listeners and the viewers find your book? Where can they buy it?
Yes, thank you. So Amazon is one place. Local bookstores can also order it, but you can do Kindle. I'm working on the audio book. Again, my players like, this is such, be in the locker room with you, coach, be in the locker room. But Amazon is a great place. And I have a website, sherrylevin.com. And there's links there to get it as well. It's 150 pages. A lot of my friends are reading it on the planes when they're traveling. And now we're getting into summer months, so it's a great summer read. But it really not only will boost your positivity, but hopefully give you ideas. And it's a playbook for really how to navigate life.
Fantastic. Sherry, it's been a pleasure having you on the podcast. Thank you so much for joining Sports Management Podcast.
My pleasure. Thank you, Marcus.
Thank you for listening to the Sports Management Podcast. Please hit the follow or subscribe button on your podcast app so you don't miss out on any upcoming episodes. If you want to get in contact with me, send an email to sportsmpodcast@gmail.com, connect with me on LinkedIn, or follow the podcast on Instagram, X, and Facebook @SportsMPodcast.